Hello, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris at the Gettysburg National Battlefield in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of a titanic clash between the Army of Northern Virginia and the Union Army, the Confederates under Robert E. Lee's command and the Union under George G. Meade's command here in central Pennsylvania, as the Confederacy attempted for a second time to invade the northern states. The first time, of course, was the Battle of Antietam. It took place in 1862, but this battle took place in Gettysburg from the 1st to the 3rd of July, 1863, 162 years ago. And I'm here at the site of the Little Round Top, the now famous battle that took place and heralded in the movie Gettysburg from TNT and, of course, Ted Turner. That movie with Jeff Daniels playing the role of Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, the commander of the 20th Maine Regiment. That battle took place right here where I'm standing. Confederate regiments came up this space over this hill right over here on Wright Avenue. They came up here and marched up and tried to take this position. And approximately 35, 40 meters above me is where the actual 20th Maine set up the defensive positions. I'm going to turn the camera around now so you can get a view of it. This is what the Confederate regiments faced as they came through here, hot, tired, wearing woolen uniforms, being forced to march through brush like this, over rocks like this, up the hill to approximately 40 meters up there where the rocks are placed. You can see the defensive line from the 20th Maine, where Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain laid out his forces as they ran out of ammunition, and forever immortalized by the Killer Angels Jeff Sherrod's book, and then later in the movie Gettysburg by Ted Turner. From up here in the defensive positions of the 20th Maine Regiment, as I said, on the extreme left of the Union flank, you can get a feel for the daunting challenge for the exhausted, exasperated, tired, frightened soldiers, the Confederate regiments coming up this hill, and what they had to go through. You can see the terrain, brutal, lots of rocks, lots of vegetation, bullets bouncing off of boulders, striking people unexpectedly, leaders falling down in action, leaderless units driving forward inexorably towards a goal, not knowing what's going to happen, frightened in the July heat. Eventually, out of ammunition, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain told his men to charge down this hill into the ranks of the Confederate regiments, saying they were tired, they're exhausted, they've got nothing left. And it worked as they charged down the hill and capture the Confederate commanders from the regiments and the Confederate regiments. And that was one of the most serious points at which the Confederates might have penetrated the Union defense here in the extreme left of the Union line at Gettysburg. Another one of those key points is where the Minnesota regiment stopped a gap in the Union lines at a critical juncture. But I'm going to take you up to the top where you will see what the Confederates were facing as they tried to come over or around or through Little Round Top and Big Round Top. This is Little Round Top, Big Round Top behind me, and we'll get a view looking down on the battlefield, the immense odds coming up this hillside. Can you imagine the tremendous amount of courage or fear it took to continue marching into battle, into certain death? Shocking, to say the least, something very few people can even fathom as they go about their daily life around the world. But the courage on display here at the Battle of Gettysburg on both sides of the conflict, the Confederate States and the Army of Northern Virginia and the Union side, was epic and heroic. I'm at the spot where the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Regiment was put into the breach as Confederate forces were about to penetrate the near center of the Union line at the Battle of Gettysburg. This regiment raised 1,000 volunteers in Minnesota, but on this day, they were already whittled down to just 262 effectives. 262 Minnesotans plugged the gap that's behind me as Confederate forces marched through here and were about to penetrate and cause chaos in the near center of the Union line. The Minnesotans were outnumbered 6-1 at this battle, 6-1. Yet they didn't hesitate. They marched straight into the battle and bought the Union time to bring other units up to plug the gap behind them. 215 members of the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Regiment were killed, wounded, or captured at this site. Courage beyond comprehension. Something lacking in today's world. Unbelievable. In the summer heat, over 90 degrees, right here. Often identified as the high point of the high mark of the Confederacy, the Battle of Gettysburg culminated in several key battles or portions of the battle, including right here, the center of the Union forces. Lee ordered Longstreet and his other generals to do a coordinated attack on the flanks of the Union Army, hoping to roll them up. We've already talked about what happened at Little Round Top against the 20th Maine, Alabama, and Texas regiments, unable to penetrate, and the other soldiers unable to get up Round Top. What a brutal situation there. Also, many other battles taking place. The Peach Orchard out here to my left, to the southwest of this spot. But here in the center of the Union line, Lee took a big gamble. He took a big gamble. He sent 3 Confederate divisions, including George Pickett's division, and Pettigrew's division, and Trimble's division, and sent them against the center of the Union line. These soldiers, in the hot July temperatures over 90 degrees, marched across open field after a 150 cannon bombardment by Confederate artillery on the ridge line directly opposite here, about 1 mile away. Unfortunately for the Confederates, most of the rounds overshot the Union troops who were in these positions here and hit the trains behind us, wreaking havoc amongst the trains, killing horses and men, but not having any major effect on the actual combat fighting troops that were located here. This spot here is where the artillery battery is located. And Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing was decorated with the Congressional Medal of Honor well over 150 years after he died at this battle during the Obama administration. But the Confederates came across this hot field, over 90-degree temperature, wearing woolen uniforms, many with tattered shoes or no shoes whatsoever, marching. And as they got to the extreme center here, a couple of hundred Confederate troops actually penetrated the line under the leadership of General Armistead. General Armistead took his cap, his hat, placed it on top of a saber and waved and said, "Come on, boys, let's give them cold steel." Shortly afterwards, he was mortally wounded, right here to my left. This is the spot where Confederate General Lou Armistead was mortally wounded. He collapsed here and died after leading his men through 1 mile of open ground to take on the center of the Union forces, where Lee erroneously thought was the weakest part of the Union forces. Armistead died here. See in the distance all of that terrain that the Confederate forces marched across to get here. Open terrain, 1 mile. General Armistead died. And most of his troops either died here or captured because Union reinforcements arrived just in time to engulf the Confederate troops that had broken through. Lee's gamble was foolhardy, and it cost his army in Northern Virginia potentially a victory here at Gettysburg. Many call it the high water mark of the Confederacy, and indeed perhaps it was. Never again will the Confederate States of America threaten the safety or the sanctity of the Union. The United States will continue, and eventually all Confederate forces will be defeated by 1865. Lee's army itself, of course, surrendered Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia in 1865. But here, in a titanic, epic struggle, forces from the Army of Northern Virginia, augmented with troops from all over the Confederacy, and the Union Army clashed. And General George D. Meade, who had only taken command of the Army just days prior to this, led the Union Army here to victory, something the Union Army had rarely seen. And this was the last time that Lee mustered an effort to invade the North. And after the Battle of Gettysburg, and of course Vicksburg, which occurred also along the Mississippi, these were the turning points of the war. From those points on, the Confederacy had no hope of surviving. Outmanned, outgunned, out-resourced, and arguably, one could say, out-morally represented. The Confederate States could no longer hold it together. The Battle of Gettysburg, 162 years ago. This is the final day.